And I'm joined now with David Hurd. He is the author of From Pearls to Oil. And not just the author of this book, you have actually lived this book. You've been in this region for so many years now. Tell us just, what is the essence of this book?
Well, I came here back in 1963 as a petroleum engineer, and for the company that had already came here many years earlier. It's the old Iraq Petroleum Company, a group of companies, and I knew that they had an interesting story behind them back in the 30s. I had no idea what it was all about, but time went by, and one day after I'd retired, I set to work to look at their archives. And I found that they were so fascinating and interesting, covered with dust and grime, but I got them out, got to work on them, and have put together this book, which has got a lot of really fascinating stories about what was going on here in the 30s, written by our company people.
Oh, that's absolutely fascinating. So when you look back, and because really a lot of people assume that oil is really only about maybe 50 years plus in this region, but you're saying even before that there was an awful lot of work going on.
There was a lot of work going on, but there were many reasons for that work going on. It perhaps wasn't all just oily, but political as well, but that's another story for another day. But the people came down here in the 30s to secure concessions from the rulers, the various rulers, Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah, Dubai, and so on, Abu Dhabi, and sent also geologists to have a look around. But the geological word at the time was Abu Dhabi is a hopeless case. There is no oil here. And the reason was quite simple. Up in the north, it was about 1,000 feet down, bubbling to the surface. It was around everywhere. You had rock structures that were quite obvious. Oil was there, and it had been worked there for centuries in a small way in Iran and Kirkuk in Iraq. Here, the rock formations are almost flat. You don't see anything, and there's sand everywhere, isn't there? So you don't really see much. Our people are always heading towards the mountains, but the sand in Abu Dhabi covered everything, and then you look a bit closer and you find the rock formations are almost horizontal. That's hopeless, and of course there are no seepages of oil, because instead of being 1,000 feet down where it could easily seep up to the surface, here it is 8,000 or 9,000 feet down, and to find that is a little bit more difficult.
But indeed, that's what they did. And years later, I think we all see the great success story. So funny how you say when they look back all those years later, they weren't particularly interested here. Tell me a little bit more about this in terms of you don't want to give the story away because we're all looking forward to reading this, but a few key highlights.
I think one of the highlights that I like to think of anyway is my hero, one of the heroes, but I suppose the main hero is Haji Williamson, who, born in 1873 in Bristol, and went to Clifton College for a brief time, but he ran away from his father and never came back to Britain. He ended up in the Gulf, and after quite a long story actually here, I'll leave that out, but he then came to work for Anglo-Persian, which became BP, and got the first agreements here. But he also came up against his arch enemy, who came down here too to get the second agreements, the concession agreements. His arch enemy failed miserably to do it and blamed Haji Williamson for conspiring against him in the background, which of course was not true, we think. Who knows? Who knows?
It sounds absolutely fascinating tales of oil on the frontier, and indeed, the likes of a movie. I think we could probably find a few scripts in this. But again, you've only covered up to a certain year on this.
Yes, well, I got writing, and I got to about 600 pages, and publishers told me 200 or 300 pages is really the absolute maximum. After that, it's not commercial. So I just took it away and found someone who was willing to publish it, but I thought that's enough for one book. So it was 1946 when I stopped with my 600-odd pages.
So wait a minute, 1946, so that means we might be looking for volume 2.
Inshallah.
We leave it there. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.